Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor. I do have cinnamon in my coffee, and Brad Garlinghouse did an interview with Bloomberg. And so I went through this video and I just wanted to cover with you some of the things that he said that caught my attention and some of the things that I got out of this interview. Because Brad Garlinghouse has not done too many interviews recently, and so when he does one, as I've said many times before, words mean things, especially to me. And because words mean things, I listen very closely to the words of the CEO of Ripple, because he's probably, I normally put Joel Katz, David Schwartz, as the most important person at Ripple, and then Brad Garlinghouse. And that's not counting Chris Larson, just because he's not physically with the company. I guess he's the chairman, so it's a little bit different. But anyway, this was an interesting interview, and the great thing about it is the things that Brad Garlinghouse says exude an extreme amount of confidence, and that, to me, is more telling than anything. One of the first things the lady, this was, by the way, it's at the Singapore FinTech Festive. And her name that's interviewing him with Bloomberg is Haslinda Amin with Bloomberg Markets Asia. Now, she got out of this, the headline they pulled out of this interview is Ripple CEO discusses cryptocurrency XRP need of a global framework in terms of regulation. I got some things out of there that I thought were a lot more interesting even than that. But anyway, she starts off by saying, what will drive the price of XRP in the next 12 months? And Brad Garlinghouse, he talks to her at first about, overall, he talks about use cases as what's going to drive the overall XRP market. And first he talks about COIL and micropayments, and the idea that through COIL, instead of paying like a $10 a month subscription to a website to read all of the articles, you might be able to pay a few cents to read just one article. And so he mentioned that, and then he went into Ripple and their use case for XRP, and he said that they are signing over 2 production contracts per week, which I thought was pretty amazing. The one thing that's extremely obvious to me, not just with this interview, but in everything that I ever see having to do with Ripple, and it's been this way at least for the last full year, and that is not just the confidence, but the how fast their product seems to be being taken up. I mean, they obviously have a winning product, because the amount of banks and payment companies that are getting on board is just an amazing pace that they've got. So moving along back to the interview, one of the things that Brad Garlinghouse mentioned is that the regulatory framework, he mentioned that it's come along slower than he had hoped, regulatory framework, and in turn, many of the things that would come as a result of that, like institutions coming in. He said it's happened slower than he thought, but he thinks that that's going to only get faster. And he said that we needed a global regulatory framework. And he specifically mentioned, he specifically mentioned that the United States was a lot slower in the regulation part of things than he had hoped. He went on to mention the backed exchange and the importance of that in December. The backed exchange will launch. And he also mentioned Fidelity Digital Assets and how important that was in terms of how far digital assets are coming along now. He also mentioned the event that he was at there in Singapore. He said that last year at the same event they had 30,000 people. He said this year they have 40,000 people, which shows you behind the scenes how fast this industry is growing. which I thought that was very interesting too. He said that there are more institutional buyers than ever before, and he said you will see that grow. Now, I wanted to make a point here. He was referencing this past report where Corey Johnson had said, I believe he said that institutional investment had gone up by 400%. And at that time, I made the point regarding Corey Johnson that a guy who was worried about the SEC declaring XRP a security, do you think he would be out there bragging about institutional investors increasing their purchases of XRP if he was worried about that? And the answer to that's an obvious no. Well, now we have the CEO of Ripple who is also bragging about how the increase in institutional purchase of XRP. Now, what CEO on the planet would thumb their nose at, would stick their finger in the eye of the SEC that way if they had not already worked out behind the scenes that XRP is not a security? They would not. That would be the most irresponsible thing in the world to do something like that. They would not do it. And my point in saying that is, I've thought for the last 6 months at least that they already had this SEC thing worked out, and the SEC gave them some marching orders and a set of instructions. So here's the things you have to do. First, you need to separate yourself from the XRP, and then they went and created the logo. There was a logo created that was separate from Ripple, and then they said they also said that you need to begin to do various things to continue to separate yourself, make XRP and Ripple two different things. And if you really pay attention, that's what's been going on for the last 6 months to 8 months. And I think that Ripple has literally been working a checklist in this regard. And but the great thing, and the thing that you need to get out of this, is that the CEO of Ripple would not be saying these kind of things about XRP purchases and sticking his finger in the face of the SEC if he didn't already know. And for that reason, and here's how that affects you and me, as an XRP holder, just imagine what will happen when down the road. I mean, to me, watching the CEO come out and say this is almost as good as someone having insider information, which is illegal. But when I see the CEO of Ripple coming out and talking about XRP and how institutional buyers are buying it left and right, do you think for a minute that those institutional buyers have not called up the CEO of Ripple and said, no, wait a minute, we're reading about all this security stuff in the newspaper, but we don't want to put our clients in this? There is no way on God's green earth that Brad Garlinghouse does not already have at hand something that he's telling them. Yeah, here's a contact at the SEC you can talk to. They're not. We've worked this out. There's no way that there's too much money involved. So anyway, moving along through this article, he says that he thought institutional investment had underachieved, and it was due to the lack of the regulatory clarity. And he said it was due to the lack of the custody issues being resolved, which are being resolved now. Then the lady, the woman interviewing him, went on to say, she said, now we're hearing these rumors that Swift is joining Ripple, and she wanted him to address that. This is where it gets really, really interesting, in my opinion. He said that Swift was owned by the banks, and we are here to help the banks. And then he says there have been opportunities where maybe there's partnership opportunities. We have not been able to bring those to fruition. He said we have over 100 of Swift's customers. Now, he mentioned first that Swift had said in the past that they didn't think blockchain will be a solution to correspondent banking. And then he says, we have over 100 of Swift's customers saying they disagree with Swift on this. And then I believe she asked, could Ripple one day take over Swift? And to me, this is the greatest line. If I was creating this headline right here, like I did the headline in my YouTube video, this is what my headline would have said. Because then Brad Garlinghouse goes on to say, this is after she says, could Ripple one day take over Swift? He says, I think we're doing and executing on a day-by-day basis. I think what we're doing on a day-by-day basis is, in fact, taking over Swift. In other words, our product is so much better than theirs. We're taking them over with every day that we work forward because their product can't compare to ours, and he knows it. And then one of the last things he said, and then I'll kind of summarize my thoughts on this. He said that he just saw a remittance company that works with Ripple reduce their transaction costs to their customers overnight from $20 to $2 using Ripple's technology. $20 to $2. He said that remittance company saw an 800% increase in their usage overnight. Now, I've told you in the past about an article. I've shown you an article where Michael Arrington was talking about how his hedge fund sent $50 million and it took them 3 or 4 seconds and cost them pennies to move the money. And I've pointed to that and told you this is how you know that the world's about to change and how you own the greatest digital asset ever created. And now what you're seeing is Ripple and their use case. And when you start to see numbers, it becomes an undeniable thing what is about to happen to the world in terms of how it's about to change. When you're saving companies money, you're saving going from something costing $20 to a customer to $2, and that company in turn is seeing an 800% increase in their usage of their product overnight. The world is about to change. So, what do I get out of this Brad Garlinghouse interview? It's really quite simple. Regulatory certainty and custody has been an issue. We've talked about all this. But here's the beautiful thing. The beautiful thing is, since I was in this from 2013 to today, back then, all we were seeing in the news was that so-and-so country was going to ban cryptocurrency. We weren't even close to what we're talking about now. Now, it's not a matter of whether we're going to have good regulation. It's in the works, but it's been kind of muddy. The water's been a little muddy. But all of the countries of the world, they're not saying they're going to ban it. They're saying they're working on regulations, and many of them have already created their frameworks already. The United States admits that they're creating their framework. Same thing with custody. Way back when, the news media and all of the traditional financial people with regard to custody, they weren't even talking about custody in 2013. They were talking about how dangerous it was to own cryptocurrencies and how it was just a fraud, and it was for hackers, and it was for money launderers. They weren't even going to address custody because this was all a big fraud. Now you got some of the biggest custody companies in traditional finance in the history of the world that are involved in this, and they're creating custody solutions right now, and they've been working on it all year, if not longer. And then to institutional investing, it's not uncertain as to whether they're coming. It's been a little uncertain while the regulation and the custody has been being worked out, but it's very clear that they're coming. It's increasing in the percentage of the amount of money is coming in. It's going to snowball, because as the regulation and the custody solved, that part's going to snowball, and then that will snowball into all of these. As Morgan Stanley said this past week, this is now an institutional asset class. Well, that means that the next step will be, once those institutions get their money parked, it will become a retail, average Joe investor asset class. And then the financial advisors of the world will descend upon their clients. They will start recommending to them that they need to put maybe 0.5% to 1% in digital assets. And the ETFs will come and the mutual funds will come. And then finally, what I get out of this interview is that this is the thing that blows my mind more than anything. I'm blown away by the confidence that Brad Garlinghouse has when he talks about Swift. Swift's dominance is not a question to this guy. The And obviously the security issue is not a question either, because they wouldn't be saying some of the things they're saying if it was. But the SWIFT dominance is no longer an issue to the people at Ripple. You can see it in everything that all of them say. They know they're about to beat SWIFT. They know that SWIFT has a choice to make. And that is what I get out of this video more than anything. And if you even take 10% of SWIFT's business, XRP holders better get ready to have a lot of money, is all I've got to say. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe and hit the like button and tell your friends and family that the digital asset investor said that Swift's dominance is no longer in question. Thanks for listening.